Anyone have any other ideas? Ooh, that's a good question. We can try and find the person that lit it. That is an excellent suggestion as well. Okay, so that's another thing that would be helpful, is finding out who lit the candle and then when did they light it. It's very good. Okay, anyone else have any suggestion? Let's say it's a little bit difficult to get hold of the person. Is there something? Yeah, Silani, did you want to say something else?
Just thinking, maybe if you say it's in a room, is there a little bit of a wind? Is it by the window? Because that's the case, then it's gonna burn quicker than if it's, there's no any wind blowing.
That's
I think.
excellent. That is fantastic. So all of these factors actually affect how quick it is. So that's what you're talking. We also need to know how quick is this candle burning, isn't it? Okay. So, and these factors that could influence how quick this candle is burning. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is facts versus assumptions. Okay. When is something a fact and when is it actually an assumption? Now, in order to do this, I'm going to start by just explaining to you what a fact is. So a fact is something that you can prove is true through objective evidence. So I want you, if you can, and you have something to write down, remember, what do we need to do when we start out? We need to define our terms. We need to say, okay, if I'm going to talk about facts and assumptions, what is a fact? Let's define a fact. Okay, so I want to define for you, I want to tell you what we mean by a fact. Fact is something that we can prove true by objective evidence. Okay, so let's just pause it down. Have you written that down? Something, if you're on a computer, so open Word if you don't have it, so that you can look at that definition. Something that I can prove true by objective evidence. Now, that's a definition. What did we say? What do we need to do when we have a definition? We need to define the words that we're using in that definition, isn't it? So a fact is something that I can prove to be true with objective evidence. What words am I using in that statement so that I can have a better understanding by what do we mean about a fact? What words, other words do we also need to understand? What do you mean by that word?
What do you mean by objective?
Oh, so, okay, what does objective mean? That's excellent. Okay, what do I mean by objective? So we're going to define each one of these just now. So you've asked me, what do I mean by objective? Okay, let me tell you what I mean by objective. I mean by objective, I wrote down these words, so I just want to go make sure I follow. By objective, I mean it's the same for everyone. So objective isn't different for me and different for you. So objective evidence would be what I'm doing is the same for you and it's the same for me. Does that make sense? What objective means? Do you understand?
So it's a common goal.
Say again?
It's a common goal.
It's not necessarily a goal, an objective. If we use objective as a noun, in other words, it's my goal I want to reach. Yes, objective can be a noun, but here I'm using it as an adjective. An adjective means I'm describing the type of evidence. I'm saying it's objective evidence. The opposite of objective is subjective. So subjective means that it is true for me, or it's the way I see it. It's not necessarily the way you see it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Objective means it's the same for both of us. Do you
Okay.
understand what
Got
we
it.
mean by, so the
Yes.
evidence, we should both agree on the evidence. It shouldn't be what I see, but it's different than what you see. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If
Perfect.
something is a fact, one of the things is it should be the same for you as it is for me. Then it is a fact. Does that make sense? That's
Yes.
one of the things for something to be a fact. Okay, let's go to the next one. What other word am I using? I'm saying it's something that can be proven true by objective evidence. What other words am I using that I need to explain? Come on, there's lots of words I'm using there. Okay.
Evidence.
Evidence. Thank you, Danielle. Evidence. Okay. What do we mean by evidence? Does anyone want to give me a shot at what do we mean by evidence? Thanks, Cameron. I see you also said evidence. Okay, I've got lots to say today, so if someone doesn't want to go, but so evidence, I would say, is convincing information. So evidence is convincing information. So it's objective, convincing information. In other words, if I give you evidence, I give you information that is convincing. In other words, like let's say, for example, in a court case, there's evidence that one person killed another person. Now, some evidence could include, for example, his fingerprints are on the weapon. That doesn't prove he did it, but it's evidence. It's convincing information. Another thing might be that he was on the murder scene. Someone saw him at the murder scene. That's evidence. It's information, something you can know, but it is convincing. Now, if I say evidence is convincing information, I must tell you what convincing means, and I think you guys would understand what I mean by convincing. Like it is, especially if I say convincing information, what I mean by information is it's data that can be understood. In other words, I'm telling you something, it's data. Data just means like it's something, but that you can understand that something. If I just say 74, the number 74, that's data, but it's not information because you don't understand what I mean by just 74. If I say he's 74 years old, now it's information. Data is just something, just a number or gun or anything. Information is now it can be understood. Okay. Now, if you say, okay, but what does understand mean? And then I would say it means it's meaningful to your mind. Okay, so I'm drilling down, but as you can see, we need to just be clear. So what do I mean by a fact? So a fact is something that's objective evidence. What does objective evidence mean? What does evidence means is I'm giving you information that your mind can understand, and that information that I'm giving you, so it's evidence, is convincing. And it's objective. In other words, it's true whether you or it's objective. It is that information can be understood and found to be evidence, whether it's you that did the test to see, or if someone else is doing the test to see. So, for example, if there's fingerprints on a weapon, it's objective if one detective tested the fingerprints and another detective tested the fingerprints and they get the same answer. Do you understand? In other words, it would be subjective if you ask someone, do you think Michael killed this person or could kill a person? If that person say, I think they can, I think Michael can kill a person, then that's subjective. It's evidence because he knows Michael. Okay, he's giving information about Michael, but he's giving his subjective opinion. It is, if you ask someone else about that also know Michael, they'd say this is Michael's biggest enemy. You might ask Michael's wife or his children, and they say something completely different. Do you understand the difference? What we mean by objective evidence? It's information being given that would be the same whether one person gives the information or another person. Another word that I'm using is the word true. What do we mean by something is true? So that is actually a difficult thing to define. I remember at university, I once asked one of my professors, what does What is the definition of truth? And because here's the problem is if I say truth is something that is true, then I'm using a circular definition. I'm using truth to define truth. So I really struggled with that. Like, what does true mean? And I went to ask my professor, and he's like, don't ask me. Go ask Professor, his name was Rosinger. He was, I can't remember, Russian. I can't remember exactly his surname. But I asked him that question, and he kept me busy for 2 hours in his office. I loved every moment. He was the funniest guy, but such a philosopher. And we just had a fat conversation. But anyway, so here's the difficult truth. To define truth is actually quite difficult. What is true? Because so here's something that I think could be one of those assumptions where you can't really define it. You and I would say, like, and most of you didn't ask me or didn't say, what does truth mean? We have a common understanding that truth is something that is true because it's true, like it is. And so one of the philosophers defined truth as truth is saying that something is that it is, and if it is not, that it is not. That is truth. When something is, you say it is, and when something is not, you say that it is not. Okay, so that, I think it was Archimedes.
It sounds similar to objective evidence, the truth as well, because it's something sort of undeniable.
It is something undeniable, and what a fact then is that you are using objective evidence to show something is true. You understand? So in other words, everyone agrees that this is actually, it is what it is. But how do I know it is what it is? By showing objective evidence that everyone can agree about. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yes.
Yeah. So something is true, but how do I know it's true? One way is, like, if it's a fact, it means I can give objective evidence that everyone can agree upon. Okay, that
Yeah.
is. Now, for this statement, for a fact to exist. Now, I just said what a fact is. Now let's get to assumptions. An assumption, I'm not going to do the same with assumption to go into every, but an assumption is an idea or a belief that you accept is true without giving the objective evidence. Do you understand? So a fact is true, an assumption is true, but a fact is something that you can prove with evidence is true, whereas an assumption is something that you accept is true. You receive, yes, it's true, but you can't prove it. You believe it. That means it's an assumption. Does that make sense? Sorry. Oh, there, I see the thumbs up. Sorry, I'm not on that screen. Okay, so an assumption is something, it's true, at least you believe it is true, but you can't prove it. Now, here's the thing. All of us have assumptions. If I start with something, and let me, if I start with something, I have to assume, like, if I say something is true, and this is a fact, I used evidence to prove that fact. But in everything that I do, I need to prove the things that I use. So, for example, I'll use another example. Okay, the inside angle of a triangle. I spoke about that last week. So here's a triangle. Let me start by just first drawing a triangle. So here's a triangle. All of you know the theory that says the inside angle of a triangle is 180 degrees. Okay, so if I add up these angles here, I should get 180 degrees. Now, that is that a fact or is that an assumption? Just unmute your mics. I can't see on the screen. So tell me if one of you know. Fact or assumption? The inside angle of a triangle is 180 degrees.
Well, I've been there in the Google Meet that we had when to discuss it, so somebody else needs to
Okay,
answer
but you can say it. It doesn't matter. Is it a fact or assumption?
assumption.
It's not.
It's
Okay.
fact if you assume it's on a flat.
Yes. Okay, very good. It's fact if you assume we're working on a flat surface. Well done. That's a good answer. So let me show you quickly. So here, how can I prove objective evidence? I can bring out 20 triangles and I can measure every angle, add them together, and all of us will agree it is 180 degrees because I'm measuring it on a flat surface. Okay. So objectively, we use the same tools. We all could do it. We all get the same answer. That's objective evidence. Okay. Does that make it a fact? Well, it's a fact because we made an assumption. Let me show you the proof. How would I prove it? So here, I would draw, to prove this, I would draw a parallel line. So this line is parallel to that line. And if I prove it to you, I can say, well, this angle here is equal to that angle there because of, and I'm just assuming you guys are going to remember your maths, because of that Z, in other words, alternate angles. This angle here, let's make that a different color. This angle here is equal to that angle there, which makes it also alternate angles. Because these angles, it's again that little Z. So those are equal. And these three add up to 180 degrees. So yellow, a green, red, and purple add up to 180 degrees. So green, red, and purple adds up to 180 degrees. There's the proof. Okay. But what did I assume when I was doing this proof? I did a proof for you, but I made an assumption. What assumption did I make? Yeah, in the proof I showed you now, not about the flat space or what did I use to prove this?
In what sense are you looking for the answer? Because like you can say something like you use math to prove it, but that could
Okay,
also not
good.
be
I'm
the
using
answer.
math to prove it. But in the proof that I just showed you, I used something. I used a theorem or something that you guys just accepted was true. I used that. What did I use? And I'm assuming you guys are remembering your maths. Maybe that's a mistake. Well, let me tell you, I used the theorem that says that this angle is equal to that angle if these lines are parallel. So I assumed something. I assumed that is true. Now, the next question, is that a fact or an assumption? And it's actually, it comes from an assumption. The assumption is that if I have two parallel lines, then the angles between on the inside, they're called the co-interior angles, are 180 degrees. I don't want to get distracted with the maths. All I'm showing you is that a fact is only a fact based on assumptions that were already made. So if you and I agree on the assumptions, then you and I should agree on the fact because we can give objective evidence. So if I'm disagreeing with someone, so for example, we have this candle that is lit in a room. You come in and you say, this candle has been on for 2 hours. Another person says, no, it's only been an hour. Okay. There's certain things we can go and do. For example, we can say, okay, let's do an experiment. Let's, in that experiment, take a candle, light it, and then we look at the rate at which, like how long does it take for this candle to burn, the candle that I start with, to burn to this length. And then we do it. It's objective. You and I both sit there, we do the exact same thing, and let's say it took however long. Again, if we do that experiment, what were some of the assumptions we made by thinking that that experiment will give us the right answer? Just help me understand, what were some of the assumptions that we are making if we do a same experiment? We take a candle, we light the candle, we see how long it took him to reach this candle's height. Like both of you and I agree, we are objective evidence, but it was based on some assumptions. What are some of those assumptions that it could be?
One of the assumptions could be that it's like there's no wind or there wasn't. Yeah.
Very good, very good. The conditions in which this one burned is the same conditions than our experiment. Hey, okay, very good. So if I can't know the conditions, then I have to assume the conditions, isn't it? So obviously, assumptions in general isn't a good thing. You want to avoid as much assumptions as possible, but sometimes you have to assume. And then what you need to assume is a reasonable assumption that you and I can say, well, we will agree on this assumption. If we can't agree on the assumptions, there's no use for us to continue a discussion or a debate or an argument or pursue even life together if we can't agree on certain assumptions, because we will always get different answers and fight about it because we can't agree on the assumptions. Okay, so that was a good assumption, a good one. The conditions for the two are the same. What else? What other assumption would you make?
It's tough, but I think the candle has to be exactly the same. That's the same material, same whatever else.
Perfect.
Because yeah.
Excellent answer, Solani. That's exactly the same. That's exactly. So one of the things that I'll have to assume that the length of the candle that I started with is the same as the length of the candle that has been burning. Okay. And then that the material that this candle is made out of is the same as the material that candle is made of. And if I can't prove it, then cool. Sorry, I'm just reading. I never read the chats here because I wasn't on the screen. I'll try and change it a little bit to see the chats. Okay, so do you guys understand there's another assumption? That is actually a critical assumption. Now, how can I know? Someone already gave the answer. How can I know how long the candle has been burning? Oh, sorry. Another assumption that we could have made was that the candle that was burning wasn't snuffed out and then relit. Okay. We're assuming that it's been burning the whole time. Maybe that candle is 20 years old. Every now and again, someone just lights it for a little while, snuffs it out. How can I know how long that candle has been burning? Someone already said it.
Tyler's answer, that you can find the person who already lit it.
You can find the person who lit it and ask them. Okay. You're still making one assumption if you find that person. What is that assumption? Maybe two assumptions.
That the person was the one that lit that specific
Yes.
installation.
In other words, that you actually believe it is that person. Nee. What else?
And that they will tell you truthful information about the
Excellent.
candle.
That's excellent, guys. You got it. So even if you have the best evidence available, like the person that lit it is actually there, you can ask them, how long has this been burning? You're still making an assumption. One is you assume that is the person who lit it. Two is you assume that person will tell you the truth. My point just being is that you want to eliminate as many assumptions as you possibly can, but even in the end, you are going to have assumptions. You want to reduce your assumptions, but in the end, you still have to believe that your source of information is reliable, that I can believe that person, that person is actually the person that lit it. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand that assumptions it's not ridiculous? Okay. And that means that anything you know is actually based on faith. Like, because you believe these things are true. It's based on faith. Whether you are a scientist or whether you are a religious person, it doesn't matter. All positions come down to faith, because at some point you believe that the things that you think are true are true. Like, even if you can prove it up to a point, at some point you have to believe. Okay, now let me give you an example that happened on Friday with my son. My son is 11 years, he's turning 11 in 2 weeks. And he is a scout. You guys know the scouts? He's actually a cub, which is just before you get to scouts, you get cubs. And during his cub lesson, now we're a religious family, so we believe in the Bible. And during his scout lesson or his cub lesson, the lady that presented the session for them, oh, are you a scout? That's awesome. What? Nice. I'm so proud of you guys. Well done. So Noah was in his cub lesson, and the lady that presented the cub lesson told them about the Niagara Falls in Niagara Falls. Sorry, not Niagara. Niagara Falls in Canada. And she made this statement. She said the Niagara Falls are 12,000 years old. And Noah said, that's impossible because the earth is only 6,000 years old. Okay, now here is it was just excellent. I'm so glad it happened because I definitely didn't tell him the earth is 6,000 years old, but somehow in his experience as a Christian that is exposed to the Bible and things like that, that's what he believes. And this lady believes it is 12,000 years old. Now, let's just look at the statement that the lady made, that it is 12,000 years old, because here are two people that are presenting two conclusions. Now, conclusion, you want it to be a fact, but remember, all facts are based on previous assumptions. So here we have now conflicting. Noah saying that's impossible. And would you guys agree that if the earth is 6,000 years old, then it's impossible for a waterfall to be 12,000 years old? Is that a reasonable conflict? Can we accept, Tyler? Yes. Are you saying yes?
So I can say that it doesn't make sense that the waterfall would be twice as old as the earth.
Yes.
But we are only assuming that it's 6,000 years old. We're only assuming it's 12,000 years old. Look at a question like, what happened to the dinosaurs? If you look at it, you could say that God created Earth in 7 days. But 1 day for God could be 1 million years.
Yeah.
So that can also take a part in that as well.
That is excellent. So you're busy now exactly doing this, is trying to understand how we can reconcile these things. But the first thing we need to do is go down to assumptions to see where is the conflict actually. So you're correct. So what we're trying to do now is to reconcile 6,000 years with 12,000 years, trying to get an understanding. But before we try and do that, let's boil it down to the assumptions. Okay, so I'm not going to take a position at all. I'm not going to promote any of those two dates. I want us to be able to see, okay, if I have such conflicting information, how do I drill down to at what level should the argument be at? Okay, so what are some of the assumptions that the cub presenter is assuming? What do you say, Tyler?
He's assuming that the Earth is over 12,000
Okay, that's
years
a good
old.
one. She is assuming that the earth is over 12,000 years old. Okay, I think that's a reasonable assumption. So she's assuming the earth is over 12,000 years old. What else? Like, she's presenting what she believed to be a fact. So give me a little bit. What would have been part of her assumptions for presenting that as a fact?
She may have found that the specific statement was someone or from the internet, and she just assumes that it's true.
Okay, that's excellent. That's very good. So I don't know where she got the information, but let's say it's on Wikipedia. Okay, so that's exactly the example that we used before. Is here someone that or a resource that is telling you the age of this Niagara Falls is 12,000 years old, and you are correct. She's assuming that that is true. Okay, now let's think about it. Let's say it was on, because I think I went on Wikipedia and they said it's older than 10,000 years, and it's what are some of the things, because it's similar to the length of the so what do you think if I was able to assign a date? Is there anyone, let's just say in human terms, like I don't mean to invoke any supernatural force here. Is there any way of knowing for sure how old anything on Earth could be? Like, what would have been helpful? How could we have known? So, Lani, what do you think?
I don't think there's a sure way, because first of all, no human being was there as a physical witness person. So we're relying on
I
history.
just want to pause there before you go on. I really love what you're saying, because remember what we said, evidence is something we all can agree on. And part of that
Yes.
is being able to see that it happened. Nay. And you're very right. No one was there. No one has been here for 12,000 years or even 6,000 years as a human to be able to say, yes, I was there. Like I was there when it was still a trickle. Okay. So excellent. I didn't want to interrupt you. I just wanted to link onto that. Yes. So now your next point.
That's that. And then I would think that we are now relying on the science, or maybe like the physical things that are left, like the crumbs of whatever that's left, for science to interpret what those are, the skeletons of dinosaurs or whatever the case is.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. So in other words, there's something called the scientific method. Okay, so science develops these ways in which they can maybe determine how old things are. So that's what we did with the what do you call it, the candle, is we did a little experiment. We said, okay, let's test how long this thing is going to burn for. Okay, but even in that scientific experiment that we did with the candle, what did we need? We needed assumptions. So in any scientific experiment, you need assumptions. Okay, so again, there is some assumptions. One assumption we've already had was, yes, we had to assume that we can trust the source where it comes from. Okay, it's Wikipedia. Let's say we could trust that. Next is that information comes from scientific experiments that were done. Those scientific experiments are based on assumptions. Okay, what do you think are one of the assumptions that we have to make to be able to do a scientific experiment? Just think of the example that we used for the candle.
We'd probably have to put it to the test.
Okay, but so let's say we are doing that. What is one of the the assumptions we made when we were comparing this candle to the experiment candle?
To replicate?
Yes, conditions. We are assuming whatever experiment I am doing now is like that the conditions over these 12,000 years that I'm assuming it has gone, the conditions have been the same. Okay.
Yes.
That's one way. So in other words, if I have a different answer, let's say I say 6,000 years and another person say 12,000 years, am I going to say, okay, no, let's argue about these dates? No. We can drill down to the assumptions. And now I'm going to say, okay, well, you need to prove to me that the conditions have been the same. So even if you're using science, convince me that over the last, let's say 12,000 years, the conditions have been the same so that I can trust the experiments, because we couldn't put the experiment over 12,000 years, is it? We condensing our experiment. Let's say we're looking at the rate. So one way in which they know how old a waterfall is because there's erosion. So over time, a waterfall could have been here, but now it's down here. And we see, okay, this distance was 40 years. So if it started all the way back there, then it would have taken 12,000 years to come here. Does that make sense? That's one way. But again, the earth, the material that the water was flowing over is different at different stages. So you can't just say, no, you just multiply this area, because sometimes the rock was maybe softer, sometimes it was harder, over which it flew, okay? You're also assuming that it was a constant flow of water. What if there was, and this is usually the Christian answer, well, what if there was a massive flood, like in Noah's flood? Then that thing is flowing at a much higher rate, and it would have caused much more, that river to flow much quicker and with more force and things like that. But anyway, so I'm showing you, how would you disagree? You can't disagree about the dates. You have to drill down to the assumptions, okay? Here's, let's go to the point that Noah maybe made. What were some of the assumptions that Noah made?
Who's Noah?
Oh, sorry, he's my son, the one that said that it's the earth is only 6,000 years old. What were some of the assumptions he made? Tyler?
I think he assumed that because of like the times in the Bible and stuff, I think he assumed the age of the earth. He assumed that the earth was created in 7 days that are 24 hours long, and not maybe the days were like,
That is
who
excellent.
knows how long back then.
Yeah, excellent. It's a very good answer. I'll tell you one thing. He actually thought there's a verse in the Bible that says the earth is 6,000 years old. So you can just be wrong as well. Okay, there's no verse in the Bible that says it, but he is correct that if you add up all the years, like from Adam to Seth, and from Seth to Seth's son, I don't know all their names, but if you add up all the years then it gets to about 6,000 years ago, where Adam was created. Okay, Tyler is saying he's now assuming, for one, that the days up until before, those 6 days before Adam was made, he's assuming those were just 6 normal 24-hour days. That you're very correct, Tyler. That's what he's assuming. What else was he assuming? Guys, remember, assuming is not necessarily a bad thing. The point is, I must know what I am assuming, so that if someone needs to disagree with me, that is where the conversation will be about. Okay? So what else is he assuming? I get a thumbs up from Philway. I didn't see it on here. Cameron, am I missing chats? Because I just see thumbs ups. What else is Noah assuming if he says that the Bible says the earth is only 6,000 years old? So I told you one thing. Okay, well, if you add up the ages in the Bible, the years, it goes up to 6,001. What else is he assuming? Ulrika, what do you think?
So he's assuming that the Bible has a proper source, like the Bible is telling
Yeah,
you.
excellent. He's assuming the Bible is telling the truth. It's the same as if you go to someone and they say, yeah, I lit this, and they're an authority. Okay, so he's assuming that the authority, when the Bible says, let's say Adam was 930 years old, he's assuming that is true. That is an assumption. Okay, good. Another thing, I think those two are two good enough assumptions. So in other words, if Noah wants to defend his position, if he wants to, like, he doesn't, it's not about convincing other people. It's about knowing why I believe certain things and why I think certain things. You need to be able, not necessarily to defend your conclusions. Yes, you must be able to do that. Okay. But you need to know, what am I assuming? If Noah is saying that he believes the Bible is true, and that would be my position. I believe it's true. Okay. Now I can show to someone, okay, if I follow the Bible timeline, then I can show that the earth from Adam to the current age is about 6,000 years. But now Tyler is saying there's something else he's assuming. He's assuming that first 6 days is 24-hour days. Okay. And that's the level at which, so if I'm going to speak to someone else that says, no, the earth is 12,000 years old, if I say, well, the reason I think it's 6,000 is because I believe the Bible. If they say, well, I don't believe the Bible, then it almost makes it impossible to continue after that, to debate. What I can show him is that, well, using scientific methods, I can also prove to you something, but I have started with an assumption, and I know what that assumption is. Okay. And that's important. Is someone else says 12,000, they say, okay, well, I believe that because I believe in the evidence. I'm believing in the scientific method. I believe that that the conditions over which they measured it was accurate. And you can't read every scientific paper. So you are trusting that the scientific industry is honest, and that it has put in everything. Now, I'm not saying anything about that is a bad or a good thing. I'm saying that is reality. Is if you, any position is a faith position. You start by believing something, and you can give evidence to show that it is true. Like why, like if we can agree on the evidence, then I can show, well, it's reasonable, but everyone started with some faith position. Solani, you had your hand up. Sorry.
I wanted to say, should we not then revert to common sense as well in a case where someone says, I don't believe your evidence? But
So say again, Solani. I
should
missed
we,
that. Should we not?
like, apply common sense?
Yes. Yes. What is common sense? Like, how would you define common sense? Just use the word. Just use the words.
It's common sense,
Common?
as it says. It's literally common sense.
What does common mean?
Common. Wow. So common would be general.
Yeah, general and sense.
Sense is sense. Sense is logic. I don't know, but I feel like the word explains itself. I just can't put it in words.
The word explains itself. The word explains it the way you understand it. So if you say common sense and I say common sense, for me, common sense is one thing. I want to start by asking, do we mean the same thing when we say common sense? So you say common, I say good. I agree. Common means it's general. Okay. Sense, I would say, like, sense is like my eyes and my ears and my, like, it's my common experience of, and experience even has that derivative from sense. It's common experience, common understanding. So yeah, I think we would agree with that. Okay. So common sense. So for example, it was common sense to say that the earth can't be 6,000 and 12,000 years and older than 12,000 years. That's common sense. Why? Because
Yes, it has to be either or, right?
yeah, so these common things, and so that is called the rules of logic. Tyler, I want to give you a chance now, but the rules of logic, there's a few rules. There's 3 rules of logic, but even all of this means that, for example, that truth is objective. That truth is true, and if something is true, it's true for everybody. So if you say common sense, like, it means that there is something I can present that should be general and sensical to everybody. Tyler, did you want to say something?
Gonna say.
You didn't come through clearly there. Just did you want to?
You said what I was going to
Oh,
say.
is it okay? Okay, guys. The reason I want to take a few more minutes because eventually I do want to get like to the actual point. Is we're doing all of this because we want to ask the question, where do I come from? Okay, where do I come from? And I mean this in a very ontological is the philosophical word for it. Ontological way is, am I the thoughtful product of a creator, or am I the natural consequence of a mindless scientific result? So in other words, that there's and again, I'm not trying to promote any one of these two things. I want to demonstrate to you that in essence is an assumption. Like if you're going to believe that you have been created, there is a God that had you in mind. Yes, he used scientific means to get you to exist. Okay, so for example, I often tell my kids, and again, I'm not trying to promote an idea, I'm just trying to explain what I mean by a creator is not necessarily not using science, but for example, God didn't make every tree, but he made a tree that had seed, and within that seed, that first, let's say, strawberry plant had all of the future strawberry plants. So in other words, I don't mean to say God just made you, put you together, and then put you on earth. So there's not an independent, but so the difference is, where did I come from? Was I purposed? Was there a mind behind my existence? Or was the universe set in motion? There's no mind or power behind the universe, and my existence is the natural outflow of a mindless scientific process. Now, both of those positions it's a faith position. You believe the one or you believe the other. It is the most fundamental question that you can boil things down to. Is there a mind behind everything, or is everything just random processes, scientific laws that produced anything? Again, I'm not trying to push a narrative or an idea. That is something that you need to assume for yourself. And it's a faith position. Either way, you are making an assumption. And if you're going to make an assumption that I come from a mind, there's a mind that had me in mind, and through science, through the scientific methods that he made and created, I came about, that will produce a completely different worldview. So certain things can be true in that worldview that is true because you made an assumption, compared to someone that believes that, no, I'm the scientific product of scientific. And maybe there's more options. I don't want to just present you with those two options. These are maybe the two separate options. But this is what I want to leave you with today, is that that's why this is such an important topic, is to critically think about things. And in answering, this is the first question we want to answer in term one, is you going to answer for yourself, where do I come from? Because that's going to determine all the other three questions. Why am I here? Where am I going? And what is good and true? Okay. Do you guys have any questions or comments or suggestions or?
Do we need to give a reason for our assumption, or just make the assumption?
So if you can give a reason for an assumption, it means it's not an assumption. Because It doesn't mean an assumption is not reasonable. Okay, I don't mean that. If you give a reason for assumption, you are giving evidence, objective evidence, for why it is true. Okay. Now, what you could do with an assumption is you could give the assumption, and obviously an assumption is either true or it is not. So it's not whether or not, an assumption is not whether or not something is true or not. But if something is true, then it should reflect in reality. So in other words, you can have an assumption and show that it is a reasonable assumption. I'll give you an example. If you are a believer, you think that there is a mind behind the universe. You believe there's a God. Then it is a reasonable assumption, because you would expect that if there is a mind behind the universe, that's the only way that a mind can exist. So we have minds. So where did our minds and our identity come from if there isn't a greater identity? Do you understand? So in other words, you have made an assumption, but you are showing that it's reasonable. It fits with reality. Okay, that you would, if there is a mind, you would expect there to be minds. If there is someone that is the source of goodness and truth, you would expect there to be goodness and truth. Okay, and so you're showing that it is a reasonable assumption, and it's not just a random thought. If you are someone that says, no, I don't believe there is a God, I think everything can be explained with natural processes, one of the things that you would say then is that if that is true, that there is no, then I would assume that things would be random, that things would be random, but it would follow a certain pattern. And if I follow that pattern, I can predict the future with that pattern. So you can say it's an assumption, but look, I can prove that assumption true. One of the things people often say is, I would think if there was a God that's good, then there wouldn't be evil in the world. And so because I see evil in the world, I don't think there's a God that is good. Okay, so again, you're making an assumption that there is no God, and you're showing why it is reasonable. So now you and I could now, let's say we disagree, we can disagree over those two things, and I can maybe explain to you, based on my assumptions, why I think, well, you could have a good God, and maybe that's what Tyler wants to do. You could have a good God, and you could have a good God, and there be evil in the world. Like maybe you can give a reason for that to show that your position that there is a God is still reasonable, even though it's conflicting with the other person's assumptions. But this is the level at which you don't fight, there's a God, there's no God, the Bible is true, the Bible is not true, depends on what your assumptions are. Okay, sorry, Ulrika, to answer your question, it will be posted. I'll post them on the, I'll do that now because I forgot last week. I'll post it on the dynamic program portal. Okay. And then for the grade 12s, I'll send the link if you guys wanted to have that as well. Tyler, did you want to say something?
It was on when you said that the evil in the world, there can't be a God. It's like people asking, like people that have been in a terrible situation, like either a traumatic situation or a terrible accident or something, they ask, if there was a God, why did he let this happen? Like those questions are kind of hard to answer sometimes.
Very, yeah, very hard. Because it's still, it's a good question, because it challenges what we think about who God is. And for example, if someone says, if there is a good God, why does evil things happen? It forces you to define, what do you mean by good? What do you mean by evil? Okay. So you see how it's helpful to not just try and give an answer, but try and understand, like, why is it difficult for you to reconcile those things? Help me understand, what do you expect good to mean? Do we agree what good is? Is that who we think, again, if you're a believer, is that who you think God is? Okay, Danielle?
Yes, sorry, I was just more referring to why we believe it. So it's not necessarily be true, but just why we believe it. Do we have to explain that?
For yourself.
Why? Yeah.
Um,
Because I have
so
to be honest, my assumption comes from my gut feeling.
from your
I-
gut feeling.
Yeah.
So can your gut feeling change?
No,
Not.
I don't think so. I think your mind can change. Your thoughts
It
can change.
can
I don't,
change.
can it?
Yeah, it can.
I
I
don't
think
think so.
so. I think your gut can change. But Danielle, what do you assume when, because whatever reason you give is your assumption, unless you have a reason for that reason. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So what are you assuming if you're saying you believe it out of your gut?
And my gut is right.
Yeah. Okay.
But like honestly, that's not like I can't prove it's true. I'm just saying, do we have
Yeah.
to mention it?
That's your assumption. Sorry, it sounds weird. I assume my gut is true.
It's not really a gut feeling, but I don't know.
Yeah. So the very difficult thing for me, like, and this is going to be my opinion that I'm going to share, is I want to trust something that is outside of myself. Okay. So if I'm trusting in anything, like if my authority is myself, my gut or my heart, like I'm putting a lot of confidence in me. And I think that's, for one, a very arrogant position, because um, it, it seems to me that you give yourself too much credit, that your gut has that much capacity to be an arbiter, or like a judge of what is true. Doesn't mean that you don't, that your gut doesn't have, but if that's your base assumption, then you're trusting more in yourself than in anything else. And if you can admit that to yourself, I think that's an assumption, and that you can acknowledge. Personally, I want to, my assumption, I want to be outside of myself. It's not so that I can change, but truth cannot change. Reality cannot change. I might change in how I understand it, how I engage with it. One day I might not feel well, or tragedy might strike, and my gut or my mind or whatever plays tricks on me, and then I change. But if my assumption is outside of myself, I put my faith, if I can use that word, in something that is outside of myself that cannot change, I have more confidence in that than I would have had in myself. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, I do want to say, like, so I believe in like a creator, in God.
Yeah.
So like, I believe in God, and then so now everything changed. Obviously the truth is what aligns with him, and I trust him more than myself.
Yeah.
But if I have to be honest, before I accepted God, like I went from what I felt. So I think, is that what I have to say, or
Well,
just
you obviously, you as a person are making that decision on what is your assumption. So in terms of, but why are you believing it to be true is, yes, you are making that decision, and hopefully you are engaging your mind, your feelings, because you do have gut, you do have, like, but it's your mind, it's your feelings, it's maybe your understanding of the world, and I don't mean in terms of mind, but your family and everything around you points to that thing. Like, you're not just making it a random decision. So yes, it's a personal decision, but it's not just a feeling. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, and even if your feeling changes, you can still decide that that is what I'm going to believe. Even when
okay.
things are difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That actually helped.
Yeah. And I think that's why people that don't believe in a creator, they have that benefit, that they are not putting their trust in their own feelings and things. It is something out there, and they believe in science. They believe in the scientific method. They wouldn't use necessarily the word "I believe," but I think you have to, because that's what you trust in, and it is outside of yourself. The problem, I think, for me as a believer, is just, can it answer everything? It can maybe answer a lot, but can it give an account for everything? Yeah. Okay. If I go on any longer, I might start preaching. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a simple question that you're asking us, but it compels you to go deep in your thoughts and question everything. Literally, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's
Thanks,
simple,
Lauren.
but it's tough.
It is. And
Interesting.
I want to really encourage you guys, don't be scared of difficult questions. Don't even be scared of losing your faith, because if you can lose your faith, you never had it. Okay. Don't be scared of being challenged. What you should have like a pursuit for your life, is to know what is true. What is really true? Like, we all have an intuitive idea what we mean by true. And if something is not true, why would I want to believe it? Like, why? Like, it doesn't make sense. So, and if something is really true, it can stand up against any test, against any challenge. So you don't have to worry about anything that you believe or you think to be challenged. That's a good thing. Okay, try and find out what is the source. Why? And maybe the answer is, you know what? I just believe it. I believe it to be true. And that's fine. That's good. Okay. Everyone has some point where they start to believe in something, and what you want is to have as few as possible assumptions. Yeah. Good, guys. This was stunning. I'm so enjoying this. I hope you guys are learning something and having some value out of this. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do next week, but I did post some instructions for what you can do for this week, to just simple exercises to find out assumptions. Okay. Thank you, Ella. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks,
Thank
Daniel.
you.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Sulani, thanks for joining us. It was lovely to have you.
Likewise. Thanks.
Thanks, Harika, and thanks for participating. Oh, Tyler was asking. Tyler, he's in Arcadia, 10th Arcadia. Where are you? Cheers, Cameron. Oh, second Boxburg. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm sure I'll see you around at one point at one of the things.
Maybe. Maybe. Say
again?
maybe. We'll see you.
And are you going to do your Springbok? What is it called?
Yeah, Springbok. I'm working towards Springbok,
it?
and I'm looking to go on Jamboree in 2027.
What is that?
It's World Scout Jamboree, so a whole bunch of scouts worldwide meet at one place for a 3-week thing
Is it-
together. And the next one's in Poland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's cool. In 2027.
Yeah,
Oh, man.
it's quite
Cool.
expensive. Like this year's one or last year's one was 60,000 rand, 65,000 rand.
Okay. Do you have your entrepreneurship badge yet?
No, I don't.
Maybe you should work on that one first and get the money somehow.
Yeah. Enjoy, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, Tyler. Thanks for participating.
Bye.
It's lovely. Bye.